3 hours into the battle, Commander Zixthak's confidence had completely disappeared. What should have been a quick victory had become a nightmare. The humans fought like no species he had ever encountered. They seemed to get more dangerous, when they were hurt, not less. The human ship Iron Will had taken massive damage. Half the crew was dead or wounded. The ship's hull was cracked in 12 places. Any normal crew would have surrendered or tried to escape. Instead, Captain Danny Roberts ordered his ship to advance deeper into the Veltar formation. "Sir, our weapons are at 30% power," his tactical officer reported. "Our shields are completely gone. We should retreat while we still can." "Negative," Roberts replied. "We're going to take at least one more of them with us." Roberts aimed his dying ship at a Veltar destroyer. His plan was simple and terrifying. He would ram the enemy vessel and detonate his ship's reactor core. The explosion would destroy both ships, but it would also create a gap in the Veltar formation. Zixthak watched in horror as the human ship accelerated toward his destroyer. The Iron Will was broadcasting evacuation signals, but the captain was staying at his post. He was going to sacrifice himself and his ship to damage the Veltar fleet. "All ships target that human vessel," Zixthak ordered. "Stop him before he reaches the destroyer." But the other human ships moved to protect Iron Will during its final attack run. They formed a screen around the damaged vessel and absorbed the Veltar fire. Multiple human ships were taking damage to ensure that one ship could complete its suicide mission. The collision destroyed both the Iron Will and the Veltar destroyer. Captain Roberts died at his post, but his sacrifice removed another enemy ship from the battle. The mathematics favored the humans again. Science Officer Grace Williams worked frantically at her computer station on Liberty's Edge. She had been analyzing Veltar communication patterns for the entire battle. Now she was close to breaking their encryption codes. "Captain, I think I can crack their tactical network," she told Captain Barnes. "If I can get into their system, I can feed them false targeting data." "How long do you need?" Barnes asked. "Give me 10 more minutes." While Grace worked, the battle continued to rage around them. Pilot Officer Alex Chen's brother David Chen took over another fighter and continued the family's war against the Veltar. David had watched his brother die attacking the flagship. Now he wanted revenge. David's fighter was one of the smallest ships in the human fleet. It carried only light weapons and minimal armor, but David had studied the battle recordings from his brother's attack. He knew exactly where the Veltar ships were vulnerable. David approached a Veltar cruiser from its blind spot. The ship's sensors could not track objects that small at close range. David flew his fighter into the cruiser's engine exhaust and fired his weapons directly into the power core. The explosion crippled the cruiser's engines and left it drifting helplessly. David's fighter was damaged by the blast, but he had taken another enemy ship out of the fight. One small fighter had disabled a ship that carried 1,000 crew members. Medic Chris Johnson worked in the medical bay of the New Horizon while the ship was still under attack. The Veltar boarding party was fighting deck by deck through the ship. Chris could hear gunfire getting closer, but he refused to leave his wounded patients. "Doc, we need to evacuate this section," Sergeant Katie Walsh told him over the communication system. "The aliens are 2 decks away." "I have patients who can't be moved," Chris replied. "I'm staying with them." Chris continued treating wounded soldiers while the battle raged outside his medical bay. When Veltar soldiers finally reached his deck, they found a human medic who stood between them and his patients. Chris had no weapons, but he refused to move. The sight confused the Veltar soldiers. In their culture, medical personnel were non-combatants who would be spared during battle. But this human medic was clearly prepared to die protecting his patients. The Veltar hesitated for a crucial moment. That hesitation allowed Katie Walsh and her Marines to ambush the alien soldiers from behind. The attack killed 4 aliens and forced the rest to retreat. Chris Johnson had not fired a single shot, but his courage had helped win a tactical victory. The Veltar soldiers were learning that humans would fight to protect others, even when they had no hope of survival. Back in space, Grace Williams finally broke through the Veltar encryption. She could now read their tactical communications and inject false data into their targeting systems. "I'm in," she announced. "I can see their battle plans and their targeting priorities." Grace began feeding false information to the Veltar ships. She made them think human ships were in different locations. She gave them incorrect range data for their weapons. She even made them target empty space while human ships attacked from unexpected angles. Communications Officer Maria Rodriguez continued her psychological warfare campaign. She had learned enough Veltar language to create convincing false orders. Now she was sending commands that caused confusion throughout the enemy fleet. "Flagship to all vessels," Maria said in perfect Veltar military language. "Execute retreat, pattern Alpha 9 immediately." Several Veltar ships began to withdraw from the battle before their commanders realized the order was fake. The confusion created more gaps in their formation that the humans quickly exploited. Navigator Paula Stevens plotted attack courses that took advantage of every mistake the Veltar made. She guided human ships through the enemy formation like a deadly dance. Each movement was calculated to maximize damage while minimizing exposure to return fire. Paula had studied the wreckage patterns from destroyed Veltar ships. She knew exactly where their armor was weakest and where their weapons could not aim. She used this knowledge to guide human attacks with surgical precision. Engineer Nick Foster worked on the colony ship to keep their shields operational. His ship was not built for combat, but it carried most of the human civilians. If the colony ship was destroyed, the entire mission would be a failure. Nick had jury-rigged weapon systems from mining equipment and construction tools. The improvised weapons were not very powerful, but they were better than nothing. More importantly, they sent a message to the Veltar that every human ship was dangerous. Communications specialist Laura Kim coordinated between all the human ships and the colony surface. She made sure that information flowed freely between every part of the human force. This coordination gave the humans a major advantage over the more rigid Veltar command structure. The Veltar fought as separate units under central command. When their communications were disrupted, each ship operated independently. But the humans fought as one organism with multiple parts. Even when their command ship was damaged, they continued to coordinate effectively. Zixthak watched his tactical display with growing despair. His fleet was being systematically destroyed by an enemy that refused to follow the rules of warfare. The humans took risks that no sane commander would take. They sacrificed individual ships and soldiers to achieve strategic goals. But the most terrifying thing was how they learned and adapted. Every time the Veltar tried a new tactic, the humans found a counter within minutes. They shared information instantly across their entire force. They coordinated their attacks with impossible precision. After 3 hours of battle, Zixthak had lost 4 ships completely. 3 more were so badly damaged they could barely fight. His remaining ships were running low on ammunition and energy. The human fleet was smaller, but it was still fighting at full effectiveness. "Sir, perhaps we should consider withdrawal," his tactical officer suggested quietly. The words shocked Zixthak. The Veltar had never retreated from a battle against a smaller force. It would be the first defeat in their empire's 3,000-year history. But as he watched another human fighter sacrifice itself to damage a Veltar cruiser, Zixthak began to understand something terrible. The humans were not just winning this battle. They were teaching him what real terror felt like. He was facing an enemy that fought without fear, learned without limits, and sacrificed without hesitation. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Zixthak began to consider the possibility of retreat. The 4th hour of battle brought horrors that Commander Zixthak would remember for the rest of his life. The humans had stopped fighting like a normal military force. They had become something else entirely, something that turned fear into a weapon and death into a tactic. Captain Danny Roberts stood alone on the bridge of his ship Iron Will. His crew had evacuated as ordered, but Roberts had stayed behind to guide the ship's final attack. The ship's hull was breaking apart around him. Atmosphere leaked from dozens of holes, but Roberts kept his hand steady on the controls. "This is Captain Roberts to all human vessels," he said into his communication system. "Iron Will is beginning. Final attack run. Do not attempt rescue. Repeat, do not attempt rescue." Roberts aimed his dying ship directly at Zixthak's flagship. The massive Veltar vessel was 3 times larger than Iron Will, but Roberts had found its weak point. If he could ram the ship's reactor core, the explosion would cripple the enemy command vessel. Zixthak watched the human ship approach and felt pure terror. The human captain was going to destroy both ships just to damage the Veltar fleet. This was not military strategy. This was madness with a purpose. All weapons, target that ship, Zixthak ordered. Stop him before he reaches us. Every Veltar ship in range fired at Iron Will. Energy beams and missiles lit up space around the human vessel. The ship's armor melted away under the assault, but Roberts kept flying toward his target. At the last second, Roberts ejected in an escape pod. Iron Will slammed into the flagship's hull and exploded. The blast tore a massive hole in Zixthak's ship and killed hundreds of crew members. The flagship's main reactor went offline, leaving it powerless and defenseless. Roberts had sacrificed his ship and nearly sacrificed himself to remove the Veltar command vessel from the battle. One human had damaged a ship that carried 5,000 aliens. The mathematics of the exchange were impossible to understand. Science Officer Grace Williams had been working for hours to crack Veltar computer systems. Now she had complete access to their tactical network. She could see everything the enemy was planning. More importantly, she could change their plans. "I have control of their targeting computers," Grace announced. "I can make their ships fire on each other." Grace began feeding false targeting data to the Veltar ships. She made them think other Veltar vessels were human ships. Within minutes, 2 Veltar cruisers were firing at each other while human ships watched in amazement. The sight of Veltar ships attacking their own allies broke something in the enemy's morale. The aliens began to doubt their own sensors and their own commanders. Confusion spread through the fleet like a virus. Medic Chris Johnson had set up a field hospital in the cargo bay of New Horizon. The ship was still under attack from Veltar boarding parties, but Chris refused to stop treating wounded soldiers. He operated on patients while explosions shook the ship around him. When a section of the ship lost atmosphere, Chris sealed himself and his patients into an emergency shelter. He continued medical procedures while wearing a pressure suit. When Veltar soldiers broke into the cargo bay, they found a human doctor who stood over his patients with a medical laser in his hands. "You want to hurt them, you go through me," Chris said. The Veltar soldiers had never seen anything like this. A non-combatant who was willing to fight professional soldiers to protect wounded enemies was beyond their understanding. The hesitation cost them their lives as Marine reinforcements arrived. Communications Officer Maria Rodriguez had become a master of Veltar psychological warfare. She could now speak their language fluently and understand their military culture. She used this knowledge to create maximum confusion in their ranks. "All ships, this is Admiral Kixhun," Maria said, impersonating a high-ranking Veltar officer. "The humans have biological weapons. All crew members are ordered to seal their ships immediately." The false biological weapon alert caused panic throughout the Veltar fleet. Ships sealed their airlocks and stopped launching fighters. Some vessels even began emergency decontamination procedures. The humans had used the aliens' own protocols against them. But the real horror came when the Veltar tried to target the human colony directly. 2 Veltar cruisers broke off from the space battle and approached the planet. They planned to destroy the civilian settlement and force the human fleet to surrender. The cruisers entered the planet's atmosphere and prepared to attack the colony. But they found something that violated every rule of civilized warfare. The human civilians were fighting back with weapons that should not exist. Colony leader Ben Thompson had organized the settlers into combat teams. They had turned mining equipment into artillery. Construction robots had become combat drones. Even farming tools had been converted into weapons. The improvised human defenses opened fire on the Veltar cruisers. The weapons were crude compared to military hardware, but they were effective enough to damage alien ships. More importantly, they showed that every human was a potential combatant. Teenager Amy Peterson ran through the underground tunnels carrying ammunition and medical supplies. She had memorized every passage in the colony's shelter system. When Veltar soldiers tried to enter the tunnels, Amy led them into dead ends and ambush zones. The sight of human children participating in combat operations shocked the Veltar soldiers. In their culture, children were protected non-combatants. But human children seemed to fight alongside their parents without fear. Engineer Nick Foster had been working for hours to keep the colony's shields operational. The generators were never designed to withstand military-grade weapons, but Nick had found ways to boost their power using mining equipment. When the shields finally failed, Nick did something that horrified the watching Veltar. He rigged the shield generators to explode when the aliens tried to examine them. The booby traps killed dozens of Veltar soldiers and destroyed valuable equipment. Communications specialist Laura Kim coordinated the colony's defense from a hidden command bunker. She had established communication links with every shelter and every defensive position. When Veltar forces attacked one area, Laura instantly alerted defenders in other sectors. The Veltar found themselves fighting an enemy that seemed to know their every move before they made it. Human civilians anticipated alien attacks and prepared counters faster than professional soldiers could adapt. But the most terrifying moment came when a Veltar officer captured a group of human children. The officer planned to use them as hostages, to force the adult defenders to surrender. In Veltar culture, threatening children would end any battle immediately. Instead, the human adults became more dangerous. Parents who had been fighting defensively suddenly launched desperate attacks to rescue their children. They took risks that no rational being would take. They fought with a fury that terrified professional soldiers. The Veltar officer found himself facing humans who would rather die than let their children be harmed. This was not military strategy. This was something primal and terrible that turned ordinary people into unstoppable forces. Zixthak received reports from the planet's surface that filled him with dread. His soldiers were not fighting human military units. They were fighting an entire civilization that had turned itself into a weapon. Every man, woman, and child was willing to die rather than surrender. The battle statistics were becoming impossible to explain. Zixthak had started the fight with 12 ships and 20,000 crew members. Now he had only 6 ships still capable of fighting. The humans had started with 5 ships and had destroyed or crippled half his fleet. But the numbers did not tell the real story. The humans had done something that the Veltar could not understand. They had turned their weakness into strength. They had used their small numbers to move faster and strike harder. They had sacrificed individual units to achieve strategic victories. Most terrifying of all, they had shown that they would never surrender. Not their military, not their civilians, not their children. The entire human species seemed willing to fight to the last person rather than accept defeat. Zixthak looked at his tactical display and realized something that chilled him to the core. He was not just losing this battle. He was learning what it meant to face an enemy that had no concept of surrender. For the first time in Veltar history, a commander was considering retreat, not because he could not win, but because he was afraid of what victory would cost. The second hour of battle brought new horrors for Commander Zixthak. The humans continued to fight in ways that made no sense. They broke every rule of civilized warfare. When one of their ships was damaged, instead of retreating, the crew fought, even harder. Commander Ryan Cole's ship New Dawn had lost half its hull plating. Atmosphere leaked from dozens of holes. Any reasonable commander would pull back for emergency repairs. Instead, Cole ordered his ship to attack the largest Veltar cruiser. "Sir, that ship outweighs us 10 to 1, his weapons officer said. "Then, we'll have to be 10 times smarter," Cole replied. Cole flew his damaged ship in a spiral pattern around the Veltar cruiser. The alien ship's big guns could not track fast enough to hit him. Cole's smaller weapons found weak spots in the enemy armor. It was like watching a small dog attack a giant bear by biting its ankles. Zixthak ordered 3 ships to help the cruiser. The humans were making his commanders look foolish. No single ship should be able to harass a capital vessel like this. But the human ship finally took too much damage. Cole's engines failed, and his weapons went offline. The Veltar cruiser moved, in for the kill. Zixthak expected the humans to surrender now. Instead, Cole ordered his crew to abandon ship. Then he aimed his powerless vessel at the Veltar cruiser's weapons array. Using only maneuvering thrusters, he guided his ship into a collision course. "What is he doing?" Zixthak's tactical officer asked in confusion. He is ramming us with a dead ship, Zixthak replied in disbelief. The collision destroyed Cole's ship completely. It also knocked out the main guns on the Veltar cruiser. One human had sacrificed himself and his ship to remove a major threat from the battle. The mathematics of the exchange favored the humans, but the real terror began when Veltar boarding parties tried to capture the human ship called New Horizon. The ship's shields had failed and its hull was breached in several places. Standard procedure was to board the vessel and capture the crew. Marine Sergeant Katie Walsh waited in the corridor with her squad of 12 soldiers. The Veltar boarding pods had attached to the hull. In moments, alien soldiers would cut through the airlock and enter the ship. Katie's squad had no heavy weapons. They carried only personal firearms and whatever tools they could find. The Veltar boarding party would have 40 soldiers in powered armor. By any logical calculation, the humans should surrender immediately. Remember what we practiced, Katie told her squad. Make them pay for every step. The Veltar soldiers cut through the airlock and entered the ship. They expected to find frightened humans hiding in corners. Instead, they found an empty corridor that seemed too quiet. The first Veltar soldier stepped forward. A human had hidden above the doorway and dropped a makeshift explosive device. The blast killed 3 aliens and damaged 2 others. The Veltar advanced more carefully now. They used scanners to check for more traps, but the humans had prepared the ship like a maze of death. Every corridor held a new surprise. Engineer Tony Martinez had rigged the ship's internal systems to work against the boarders. When the Veltar tried to use the elevators, Martinez sent them to the wrong decks. When they tried to access the computer terminals, he fed them false information about ship layouts. Katie Walsh and her squad played a deadly game of hit and run. They would appear from hidden positions, fire at the aliens, then disappear into maintenance tunnels. The Veltar had superior numbers and equipment, but the humans knew every inch of their own ship. After 20 minutes of fighting inside the ship, the Veltar boarding party had lost half their number. They had gained control of only 2 decks. At this rate, capturing the ship would cost them more soldiers than it was worth. The Veltar commander called for reinforcements. Zixthak was forced to send troops from 2 other ships to help with the boarding action. He was starting to understand that fighting humans required more resources than fighting any other species. On the planet's surface, Dr. Helen Torres continued her analysis of Veltar technology. She had collected wreckage from the destroyed ships and was learning more about alien systems. Her discoveries were being transmitted to the human fleet in real time. I found something interesting, she told her research team. The Veltar use a centralized command system. If we can disrupt their flagship's communications, their other ships will have trouble coordinating. She sent targeting data to the human ships. The flagship's communication array became a priority target. If the humans could isolate Zixthak from his fleet, the Veltar formation would become much less effective. Communications officer Maria Rodriguez had been studying Veltar battle language for the entire fight. She was now fluent enough to give false orders that sounded authentic. She began transmitting commands that sent Veltar ships to the wrong positions. Cruiser 7, move to intercept pattern Delta, she said in perfect Veltar military language. Veltar cruiser followed the false order and moved away from its assigned position. This created a gap in their formation that the humans immediately exploited. Pilot officer Alex Chen flew his fighter through the gap and attacked the Veltar flagship directly. His small ship carried only light weapons, but he knew exactly where to aim. Dr. Torres had identified the communication array's weak points. Alex's attack run was a suicide mission. The flagship's defensive guns would destroy his fighter long before he could escape. But if he could damage their communications, it would help the entire human fleet. Alex dove straight down at the flagship's hull. Defensive fire lit up space around him. His fighter took hit after hit, but he kept flying. At the last second, he fired all his remaining missiles at the communication array. The explosions crippled the flagship's ability to coordinate the fleet. Alex's fighter was destroyed, but his sacrifice had strategic value. The other Veltar ships began operating independently instead of as a unified force. Zixthak found himself cut off from half his fleet. His remaining ships were acting on their own initiative instead of following his battle plan. The humans had turned his greatest strength into a weakness. But the real shock came when Zixthak tried to target the human colony directly. He ordered 2 ships to break off from the fleet battle and attack the civilian settlement. Destroying the colony would force the human ships to surrender. The Veltar ships approached the planet and began targeting the settlement. But instead of defenseless civilians, they found something unexpected. The colonists were fighting back. Colony leader Ben Thompson had organized the settlers into defensive teams. They operated improvised weapon systems built from mining equipment and construction tools. The weapons were crude, but they were effective enough to damage Veltar fighters. Even the human children were helping the defense. Teenager Amy Peterson ran messages between the underground shelters. She coordinated the civilian response and helped adults track incoming threats. The sight of human civilians fighting against professional soldiers was disturbing to the Veltar. Most species separated their military from their civilian population. When attacked, civilians would surrender while soldiers fought. But humans seemed to have no such separation. Every human was a potential combatant. Every civilian could become a soldier when threatened. This meant that conquering a human world would require fighting every single person on the planet. Zixthak began to realize that he was not fighting just the human military. He was fighting an entire species that refused to accept defeat. Men, women, and even children were willing to die rather than surrender. The battle had lasted 2 hours now. Zixthak had lost 3 ships completely and had 5 others damaged. The human fleet had lost 2 ships, but their remaining vessels were still fighting effectively. Worse, they seemed to be getting stronger as the battle continued. For the first time in Veltar military history, a smaller force was defeating a larger one through pure determination and adaptability. The humans were rewriting the rules of space, combat in real time. Zixthak looked at his tactical display and felt something he had never experienced before. He felt the cold touch of genuine fear. Commander Zixthak stood on the bridge of his massive warship and looked at the stars ahead. His 4 eyes focused on the small planet called Kepler 442b. The humans had built a colony there 6 months ago. They thought they could take Veltar, space, without asking permission. They were wrong. The Veltar Empire had ruled this part of the galaxy for 3,000 years. They had conquered 47 different species. Some fought back. Some surrendered right away. All of them lost, in the end. The humans would be no different. Zixthak's fleet contained 12 warships. Each ship carried enough firepower to destroy a small moon. His flagship alone had 2,000 crew members. The humans had maybe 5 ships defending their little colony. Intelligence reports said the human ships were small and weak. Their weapons looked like toys compared to Veltar technology. "Sir, we are approaching the human colony," said his tactical officer. "Our sensors show 5 human vessels in defensive formation around the planet." Zixthak clicked his mandibles together in amusement. 5 ships against 12. The humans must be very stupid or very brave. Either way, they would be very dead soon. On the human cruiser called Liberty's Edge, Lieutenant Jake Morrison watched the alien fleet approach on his scanner. The dots on his screen looked like a swarm of angry insects moving toward them. Each dot represented a ship 3 times larger than anything in the human fleet. "Jake, what do you see out there?" asked Captain Lisa Barnes as she walked onto the bridge. 12 Veltar warships, Captain. They're big ones. Our intelligence was right about their fleet composition." Captain Barnes nodded. She had studied every piece of information they could gather about the Veltar. The aliens followed strict battle patterns. They attacked in formation. They never broke rank. They expected their enemies to do the same. "Send word to all ships," Barnes said. "Remember what we practiced. Stick to the plan. Make every shot count." Below on the planet's surface, the colonists had moved into underground shelters. The colony leader Ben Thompson made sure everyone had food and water for a long siege. The children were scared, but the adults tried to keep them calm. Back in space, Zixthak gave his orders. "All ships assume attack formation Theta 7. Target the largest human vessel first. This should be over quickly." The Veltar ships moved into a perfect line. They had used this formation to destroy countless enemies. It was efficient and deadly. The humans would see the overwhelming force coming at them and surrender. Most species did, but Jake Morrison was not watching the alien formation with fear. He was watching it with interest. The Veltar ships moved exactly like the intelligence report said they would. Perfect lines, perfect spacing, perfect predictability. "Captain, they're doing exactly what we expected," Jake said. "Good," Barnes replied. "All ships, execute Plan Delta on my mark." The Veltar opened fire first. Bright energy beams shot across space toward the human ships. The beams hit the human shields and caused explosions of light. Zixthak expected to see human ships break apart. Instead, he saw something that confused him. The human ships scattered. They did not maintain formation. They flew in different directions like frightened animals, but they were not running away. They were moving in patterns that made no sense. Commander, Ryan Cole piloted his ship called New Dawn in a wide arc around the Veltar fleet. His ship was damaged but still fighting. Instead of retreating to repair, he accelerated toward the enemy. "What is that human doing?" Zixthak asked his tactical officer. "I do not know, sir. His ship is badly damaged. Logic says he should withdraw for repairs." But Ryan Cole was not following logic. He was following human instinct. His ship dove under the Veltar formation and fired at their engine sections. The aliens had not expected an attack from below. Their shields were weaker there. 2 Veltar ships suffered engine damage. They began to fall out of formation. Zixthak felt his first moment of uncertainty. The humans were not fighting like any species he had conquered before. On another human ship, engineer Tony Martinez watched his damage reports. His ship had taken heavy hits. The normal response would be to focus on repairs and defense. Instead, he had a different idea. "Captain, I can overload our engine core," he told his commander. "If we ram their supply ship, the explosion will take out 2 of their vessels." "That would destroy our ship too," the captain said. "Yes, sir, but we can evacuate most of the crew first. The math works in our favor." This was the kind of thinking that the Veltar could not understand. Sacrificing a ship to damage the enemy was not logical. It was wasteful. It was inefficient. It was also terrifying to an enemy who valued every ship. Dr. Helen Torres worked in the science lab on the colony ship. While the battle raged around them, she studied pieces of Veltar technology that had been recovered from previous battles. Other species had fought the Veltar and lost, but they had gathered valuable information. "I think I found something," she said to her assistant. "Their shield generators have a harmonic frequency. If we can match it exactly, we can disrupt their defenses." She sent the data to all human ships. Within minutes, the human weapons began firing at different frequencies. Some shots bounced off the Veltar shields, but some shots went right through. Zixthak watched in growing alarm as his ships began taking damage they should not be taking. The humans were adapting to Veltar technology in real time. This was supposed to be impossible. "Sir, the humans are somehow bypassing our shields," his tactical officer reported. "How can they do this so quickly?" Zixthak demanded. "Unknown, sir. They appear to be learning from each attack." The battle had been going for 1 hour. In that time, the humans had lost 1 ship completely and had 2 others badly damaged, but they had also destroyed 1 Veltar vessel and damaged 3 others. The exchange rate was not what Zixthak had expected. Communications officer Maria Rodriguez sat at her station on Liberty's Edge and listened to Veltar radio signals. She had studied their language for months. Now she was starting to understand their tactical communications. "Captain, I can hear their command signals," she said. "They're planning to target our engine sections next." "Can you interfere with their communications?" Barnes asked. "Maybe. Give me 5 minutes." Maria began transmitting false orders on Veltar frequencies. Her pronunciation was not perfect, but it was good enough to create confusion. Some Veltar ships began moving to the wrong positions. As the first hour of battle ended, Zixthak realized that something was very wrong. The humans should have been destroyed or surrendered by now. Instead, they were still fighting. Worse, They seemed to be getting better at fighting as time went on. The human ships moved in ways that violated every rule of space combat. They took risks that no sane commander would take. They sacrificed individual ships to damage the fleet. They adapted to new situations faster than should be possible. For the first time in his long military career, Commander Zixthak began to feel something he had never felt before in battle. He began to feel afraid. The 5th hour of battle ended not with human victory, but with something far more terrifying for the Veltar Empire. It ended with retreat. For the first time in 3,000 years, a Veltar fleet was running away from an enemy they outnumbered. Commander Zixthak stood on his damaged bridge and looked at the tactical display. Of his original 12 ships, only 5 were still capable of faster-than-light travel. 2 more were so badly damaged they could barely move. The rest were debris floating in space around the human colony. The human fleet had lost 3 ships completely, but their remaining vessels were still fighting with the same terrible determination they had shown from the beginning. If anything, losing ships had made the humans more dangerous, not less. "Sir, we are receiving surrender requests from our damaged vessels," his communication officer reported. "Surrender requests?" Zixthak asked in confusion. "Yes, sir. They are requesting permission to surrender to the humans." The words hit Zixthak like a physical blow. Veltar ships requesting permission to surrender. It had never happened before in the Empire's history. His crews were so terrified of the humans that they preferred capture to continued fighting. Captain Lisa Barnes received the surrender requests on Liberty's Edge. Her ship was damaged but still operational. She had lost many crew members during the battle, but her remaining people were ready to keep fighting. "What should we do about the surrender requests?" Lieutenant Jake Morrison asked. "Accept them," Barnes replied. "But be careful. This could be a trick." But it was not a trick. The Veltar crews were genuinely terrified. They had watched the humans fight for 5 hours with impossible determination. They had seen human soldiers sacrifice themselves to damage enemy ships. They had watched human civilians fight professional soldiers and win. Navigator Paula Stevens guided rescue ships to collect survivors from both sides. The sight of humans saving Veltar wounded soldiers added another layer of confusion to the aliens' understanding of their enemy. The humans who had fought so viciously were now providing medical care to their enemies. They treated Veltar wounds with the same skill they used to treat human injuries. This combination of savage warfare and merciful victory was beyond alien comprehension. Dr. Helen Torres worked in the colony's medical facility, treating both human and Veltar casualties. She had spent the entire battle analyzing alien technology to find ways to kill them. Now she was using that same knowledge to save their lives. "Why are you helping us?" a wounded Veltar soldier asked her. "Because the fighting is over," Helen replied simply. "Now we take care of the wounded." The alien soldier stared at her with 4 confused eyes. In Veltar culture, enemies remained enemies until formal peace treaties were signed. But humans seemed able to switch between war and mercy instantly. Engineer Tony Martinez began salvage operations to recover useful technology from the destroyed ships. Both human and Veltar vessels contained valuable equipment that could be repaired and reused. But Tony also did something that shocked the watching aliens. He organized recovery teams to search for survivors in the wreckage, human and Veltar. Rescue workers worked side by side to save anyone who might still be alive. Communications Officer Maria Rodriguez established contact with the surviving Veltar ships. She spoke to them in their own language and offered safe passage if they agreed to leave the system immediately. "This is the human vessel, Liberty's Edge," Maria said in perfect Veltar. "You have fought bravely. You may withdraw with honor if you depart immediately and do not return." The offer confused the Veltar commanders. They had lost the battle decisively. By all military traditions, they should be prisoners or dead, but the humans were offering them a chance to escape with their remaining ships. Zixthak made the most difficult decision of his military career. He ordered his surviving ships to retreat. The great Veltar Empire was running away from a human colony defended by a handful of ships. As his fleet limped away from the battle, Zixthak began composing his report to the High Command. How could he explain what had happened? How could He described an enemy that fought without fear and showed mercy without weakness. "Sir, what should I put in the official battle report?" his tactical officer asked. Zixthak thought for a long moment before answering. "Write this exactly. Do not engage human forces in direct combat. They are unlike any species we have encountered. They fight as if death means nothing and victory means everything. They turn their weaknesses into weapons and their losses into motivation." The tactical officer looked confused. "Sir, should I explain their specific tactics?" "No," Zixthak replied. "Tactics can be countered. What the humans have cannot be countered because it is not tactics. It is something in their nature. They become more dangerous when they are hurt. They fight harder when they are outnumbered. They sacrifice themselves to protect others without hesitation." As the Veltar fleet retreated, the humans began the work of rebuilding their colony. Engineer Nick Foster organized repair teams to fix the damaged buildings. Communications specialist Laura Kim re-established contact with Earth to report their survival. But the most important work was being done by the children. Teenager Amy Peterson helped coordinate the distribution of supplies to families who had lost their homes. The human children who had fought alongside adults during the battle now worked alongside adults during the recovery. Colony leader Ben Thompson called a meeting of all the survivors. Human and Veltar alike attended the gathering. Thompson wanted to establish rules for the prisoners and the rebuilding effort. "We fought each other for 5 hours, Thompson said to the mixed crowd. "Now we work together to survive. Anyone who wants to stay and help rebuild is welcome. Anyone who wants to leave can go with the next transport." Several Veltar soldiers chose to stay. They had been so impressed by human determination and mercy that they wanted to learn more about this species. Others chose to return to their empire, with stories that would change Veltar military doctrine forever. Medic Chris Johnson established a permanent medical facility that treated both species. He trained human and Veltar medics to work together. The cooperation that had begun in combat continued in peacetime. Captain Danny Roberts had survived his escape pod ejection and was recovering from his injuries. He had become a hero to both humans and Veltar. His willingness to sacrifice his ship had shown the aliens what human determination looked like. 3 days after the battle, Zixthak's report reached the Veltar High Command. The military leaders read his words with growing disbelief. A single human colony had defeated a full battle fleet. It seemed impossible. But reports from other sectors confirmed Zixthak's assessment. Everywhere the Veltar encountered humans, the results were the same. Human forces fought with impossible determination and adapted to new situations faster than any known species. The High Command issued new orders to all Veltar fleets. Human space was to be avoided. Human colonies were not to be attacked. Any contact with human forces required approval from the highest levels of command. For the first time in their history, the Veltar Empire had declared an entire species too dangerous to fight. Back on the human colony, life continued as normal. To where the humans, the battle had been just another challenge to overcome. They repaired their ships, rebuilt their homes, and prepared for the next wave of settlers from Earth. Communications specialist Laura Kim sent the final report to Earth. "Colony defense successful," she wrote. "Minimal casualties. Ready for expansion. Phase. Recommend sending more families." To humans, this had been a victory worth celebrating. To the Veltar Empire, it had been a lesson in terror that would change their military strategy for generations. The galaxy had learned something new about the species called humans. They were not the strongest, or the smartest, or the most advanced. But they were something far more dangerous. They were utterly, completely, terrifyingly unwilling to give up. In his final log entry, Zixthak wrote words that would become famous throughout the galaxy. "I have faced real terror when I went to battle with humans. They are not like us, they are not like anyone. When they fight, they become something beyond reason, beyond fear, beyond death itself. They become the thing that nightmares fear, the human colony continued to grow and prosper, and across the galaxy other species learned a simple lesson. When humans decided to defend something, they would defend it with everything they had, including their lives. The age of human expansion had begun, and the galaxy would never be the same.